Nowadays, you have some tough decisions to make. I mean, like working from home. Should you wear pants or no? I mean, come on, we've all thought about it, but I've actually done it, and it's awesome. I mean, sometimes it works great.
That sounds great, Jake. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Talk to you later. And sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, Jake. Well, can you show me those numbers?
They're actually upstairs right now. I don't have them right here with me.
All right, that's fine. You can go grab them.
Okay. I'll be right back.
Jake, are you okay?
I'll be fine. Yeah. Well, fantasy football is the same way, right? You're going to have some tough decisions to make, but don't worry, we got you covered, because the last thing we want is you sitting in your draft room with your pants around your ankles. Hit the like button, because we got some tough draft day decisions, wide receivers, right now. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're talking about some tough decisions at the wide receiver position, right? We've been preaching here for months that you need to go heavy running back early because the drop-off in potential fantasy production at the running back position is gone by like rounds 4 or 5. Well, after you have that solid stable of running backs, what are you supposed to do at the wide receiver position? There's a lot of names on the board there that a lot of people have questions about because it looks like there's so many great options. Well, in today's video, I got 10 wide receivers that we're going to kind of compare side by side to see which one of these guys are the best options for our fantasy football team here in 2020 after we have all of those stud running backs. So make sure you stick around because I got them ranked here 1 through 10 by the time we get to the end of the video. But before we get into the video, we're looking for guys that are catching balls, right? So to me, this just seems like the perfect opportunity to mention our sponsors here on the year, Manscaped.com, because the last thing they're going to do is catch your balls. I mean, have you heard of the Lawnmower 3.0 yet? The thing has got something called Quiet Stroke technology. There isn't a man on God's green earth that doesn't want to own something that has Quiet Stroke technology. Come on, fellas, head over to Manscaped.com, get yourself the perfect package, use promo code HEADLINERS, all caps, at checkout, receive 20% off and free shipping. Now is the time to take care of your boys. Head over to Manscaped.com now. But now it's time to talk some wide receivers and some tough decisions here for 2020 fantasy football. So here's the list of wide receivers that I put together, right? And I got all these names based off of a lot of the questions and comments that we see, not only on YouTube, but on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever it may be. These are the names we're being asked about a lot, so that's why I included them here in this video. You got Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Courtland Sutton, A.J. Brown, and D.J. Chark, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, Bigfoot himself, Devontae Parker, DK Metcalf, and Marquise Hollywood Brown. Now, before I go any further into this, I do want to make sure that I bring up Devontae Parker because earlier in the year, I did a video where I said, do not draft Devontae Parker in 2020. Well, since that video has come out, Alan Hearns has opted out. And then Albert Wilson opted out. I mean, there's not a lot of options anymore in Miami. Part of the reason why I didn't like him to start the year is because last year there were no other options, and then there were going to be this year. Now that they're all dwindling, Devontae Parker becomes somebody else who I'm interested in again, as long as he's my wide receiver too, and I can get him in the 5th round or later. That's where I like Devontae Parker. I'm not reaching for him, and I'm not expecting 2019 production. However, you have to be able to kind of change your opinions and ideas based off of what is actually happening here this offseason. Those players opting out, that's only more potential targets going the way of Devontae Parker. So yes, he is now off the do not draft list. We just have to watch where he goes and what his ADP is, because he may be somebody that I'll look at again here in 2020. All right, so now that's out of the way. What is it that I look for, right? What is it that I'm looking at when I'm trying to determine who the best wide receivers to choose may be for 2020 fantasy football? Well, there's a few sections that I'm really going to pay close attention to. First one, it's going to be value, right? Current ADP. The lower the ADP, the better the value. We're all about finding the best player at the cheapest price. team pass attempts per game. We want a team that's going to throw the ball, right? Because wide receivers can't catch passes if they're not getting targets. So the more targets that are available, the better. What about defensive rankings on their own team? We want to target some wide receivers that have horrible defenses. Why? More than likely, they're going to be trailing in ball games and having to throw for all 4 quarters. What about quarterback play, right? This one is kind of easy. The better the quarterback, the better the quality of targets may be, and it's only going to help that wide receiver. What about target separation? Not only are they separating from their opponent, they're getting open, but their quarterback is finding them during their targets when they are open. Fantasy points per target. This is something where you can really see how efficient a wide receiver is. Do they need huge volume to get you, solid fantasy points, or can they do more with less? What about targets per touchdown? Everybody wants the touchdowns, right? We're all looking for that big play upside. How many targets does it take for them to get a touchdown on average? I mean, the lower that average is, the better, right? Because we're looking for touchdowns. That's where we get our bulk points. So these are the sections that I really pay close attention to when I'm looking for my wide receivers here during my fantasy football draft. So let's head over and take a look at the first one, which is going to be value. All right, so we said value is ADP, right? And currently, the consensus ADP between multiple sites that we pull, this is the order that it's in and how this is going to work for each individual section. Like for right now, Cooper Kupp has himself an ADP of 38, the most expensive wide receiver on this list. So he's only going to receive a score of 1 because he is the most expensive. The cheapest wide receiver is Marquise Hollywood Brown with an ADP of 74. Therefore, he gets the 10 points. He is the cheapest option. And we're going to rate all of these guys in all of these sections 1 through 10. At the very end, we'll total up the scores and find out who the best overall wide receiver is when you take into account each and every one of these sections. So as you can see right here, Cooper Kupp and Calvin Ridley, the 2 most expensive options. Now, typically, more expensive, the better the quality of the wide receiver, right? I would think that a lot of people out there understand that Calvin Ridley may be a little bit safer than Marquise Hollywood Brown, and that's why his ADP is higher. However, we're going to continue to roll through this and find out maybe where they differ a little bit in other areas. What about team pass attempts per game? And now all of a sudden you can see that Marquise Hollywood Brown is on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Last place here, receiving a score of only 1 point because the Ravens run a lot. They do not depend on throwing the football. On average, they only threw the ball 27 times per game last year. Take that and compare it to a Calvin Ridley, who we were just talking about. The Falcons threw the ball 46 times a game, almost 20 times more a game, and that's only going to give the opportunity for targets more to a Calvin Ridley. We can see Devontae Parker down there at 42, Cooper Kupp 41. I don't see a whole lot of change in those numbers, so that's something we need to pay attention to. DJ Chark, I mean, the defense is not very good, and we'll talk about that in Jacksonville. That number could actually go up this year and help him. So these are definitely some things that we need to pay attention to heading into 2020. So talking about the defenses, once again, Marquise Hollywood Brown takes a hit. Why? Baltimore is one of the best defenses in all of football. So they have one of the best defenses, the best running game. It's really just going to limit the upside of Marquise Hollywood Brown. It may make him a little bit more big play dependent. Stephon Diggs, Cortland Sutton right after him, followed by Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, Fantasy Bigfoot himself, Devontae Parker. And then you get down to the very end. We just talked about DJ Chark, right? They're going to be one of the worst defenses in all of football. So this is where Chark kind of takes a little bit of a step forward because they're going to be throwing all 4 quarters every single game of the year because their defense just isn't that good. Also helps the like of a Calvin Ridley and a Terry McLaurin. Also, they'll benefit from playing with below average defenses. I'm not going to say that all these defenses are horrible. They're just below average. What about quarterback play? Well, when quarterback play gets introduced, all of a sudden, Marquise Hollywood Brown gets a big bump, right? Now, a lot of people want to critique Lamar Jackson, and I'm not a huge guy, a huge supporter of Lamar Jackson as a thrower, right? I mean, obviously, the dynamics of his game is based upon the running game, rushing, making big plays with his feet. I do expect him to take a step forward this year, however, throwing the football, and Marquise Hollywood Brown could be a big beneficiary of that. So as of right now, my highest rated quarterback of this group is going to be Lamar Jackson. Got him right there in the quarterback ranking of number 2. DK Metcalf with Russell Wilson. You know he's going to see quality targets. We talked about that in a must-have video not that long ago for DK Metcalf. Calvin Ridley with Matt Ryan. Stephon Diggs, we expect Josh Allen to take a step forward. And a lot of people, I think, are confused with Josh Allen because of the stigma of a wild and crazy arm. Well, the guy only had, 6 interceptions last year, so he's a lot better than he's getting credit for. If he can take any steps forward, that's going to help out the likes of a Stephon Diggs. But who can get open, right? Who's going to get open with the targets that they actually get? Well, right now, it's pretty much Calvin Ridley leading the field here, averaging 1.8 yards of separation per target, which means almost 6 feet of separation. We'll call it about, 5 feet of separation? That is wide open in the NFL. The guy can get open, and Matt Ryan can find him. Cooper Kupp, same thing, 1.66. Stephon Diggs, 1.62. All the way down to the bottom, where you see Devontae Parker. Now, this is exactly my point earlier. It's because he was seeing the volume, right? The volume was making up for the lack of big plays, the lack of separation. He wasn't able to get open all the time, but he was able to make the big plays. He was able to come down with the 50-50 balls. Things really went his way in 2019 because the numbers say, even though it's 1.2 yards, you're looking at 4 feet or so. It's not like it's a huge difference, but in the NFL, a few inches makes a world of difference. And Devontae Parker shows, out of all the wide receivers that we have listed here, he was able to create the least amount of separation between him and his opponent when he was targeted. So that's just something to pay attention to. A.J. Brown, another one of those guys who was heavily dependent on the big play last year. I know Kyle's broken him down along with Ryan Tannehill. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. What about fantasy points per target? And here's the efficiency, right? These are the guys who don't need huge volume. And we just talked about A.J. Brown being one of those guys who was very big play dependent. Well, look, he scored 2.58 fantasy points every target. Not every reception, that's every target. The guy put up crazy efficiency in 2019. Can he duplicate that in 2020? It kind of remains to be seen. I have a feeling that more opposing defenses are going to be focused on him maybe than they were a few times last year. That may change some things. You have, the likes of Calvin Ridley sitting right there at 2.1 towards the bottom of this list. He's racking up a lot of points here in this metric. Terry McLaurin, Marquise Hollywood Brown sitting both right there, 2.06, right there with Cooper Kupp also at 2.02. These guys showed the efficiency, right? Anything over 2 yards per fantasy, 2 fantasy points per target is great numbers. And you can see it right there with Kupp, Brown, McLaurin, Ridley, Diggs, and Brown. These guys show their efficiency, week in and week out. What about targets per touchdown? A couple names on the bottom of the list here really stand out to me, right? Marquise Hollywood Brown and Calvin Ridley. Now, Calvin Ridley, we've talked about a couple times here today, one of it being the pass attempts per game, right? Atlanta's going to throw the ball a lot. And if they're going to throw the ball a lot and Calvin Ridley doesn't need a whole lot of targets to score touchdowns, the potential touchdown upside could be huge for Calvin Ridley here in 2020. You got the likes of Cooper Kupp and Terry McLaurin hovering right there around 13 targets per touchdown. Still great numbers. Anything under 20 is going to be definitely something that I would pay attention to at the wide receiver position. I mean, you figure not everybody's going to score a touchdown every single week. However, we're looking for guys that are going to get you right around 10 targets a week and 1 touchdown. Every 18 to 20 targets or so is going to be a great place for somebody. If you find the wide receivers that have those, less than 15 targets, those guys are gold. If they can get the volume, they're going to put up the points. So let's see where the overall scores end up here at the end of it. All right, so here you see the overall scores. You see each individual wide receiver and the score they received in each category. Now, I didn't sort them for you because I wanted you to work for it. No, I'm just kidding. I actually sorted them for you. And here it is, the final standings, the top 10 led off by Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. Not a huge surprise, right? I mean, this guy finished top 3 in all but one category, which was value at the very beginning because he's one of the more expensive options. However, he shows that even though he may be one of the most, expensive on draft day, he provides the most efficiency, the most upside, the most stability. Love some Calvin Ridley, followed up by Marquise Hollywood Brown. I mean, what does that say about Marquise Brown that he took a last place finish in 2 categories under team pass attempts and team defense and was still able to finish second overall? to me, that absolutely screams potential for Hollywood Brown. He actually finished first in 3 metrics, to kind of get him back up in there to the top tier of these wide receivers, followed by Terry McLaurin. A lot of people love Terry McLaurin. He wasn't too far off that second place finish. 4th place, DK Metcalf. I've had him as a must-have wide receiver here on this channel for the last few weeks. I definitely like the potential of DK Metcalf. A little bit of a surprise to some people. Probably A.J. Brown and Cortland Sutton, right? Not just because they finished 9th and 10th, but because these are people that are, loved by the fantasy community, by a lot of people. They're going out there and they're actively focusing on trying to grab A.J. Brown and Cortland Sutton. I haven't really been on that bandwagon this offseason. This metric kind of shows why. They need, that they need those big plays or they need crazy volume. And with Cortland Sutton, he's not the only, show in town anymore. There's going to be other options there with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Albert O. A lot of people like Noah Fant. A.J. Brown was so efficient last year, it's almost impossible to duplicate what he did. It just adds question marks, right? But how do these guys line up with how the consensus has them ranked right now? I've kind of broken that down for you also. You can see our top 10 from this metric right here on the left, followed by the consensus rankings here on the right. The 2 biggest that stand out to me, it's A.J. Brown and Marquise Hollywood Brown. I guess it's double Brown. We're going double Browning here because in consensus rankings, the number 1 ranked wide receiver out of this group right now is A.J. Brown. He finished 9th in our metric. Marquise Hollywood Brown, the lowest ranked of all of them, and he finished 2nd. Those are the 2 guys that have really, show a huge difference here compared to where the consensus has them. So does that mean that the consensus is wrong and that I'm right? I'd like to think that. People lie, numbers don't, and a lot of this is based off of numbers, right? So trying to figure out who the best option is here for 2020, there's a lot of things to consider, right? And even in this metric, it's not bulletproof by any means. There's a lot of opinion that goes into a fantasy football team also. Remember that. So we're just trying to provide you the information so that you can make the best educated, selections during your fantasy football draft. This is not us up here telling you what to do. This is us supplying you the information so you, the team owner, can make the best decision possible, because that's what it's all about. We all have a common goal here, right? You're watching a fantasy football video right now because you want to win at fantasy football. I am making a fantasy football video right now because I want you to win at fantasy football. That's what this is all about, and we love to stay interactive. So make sure you leave those comments down below. We greatly appreciate the support. Hopefully you guys had a great week, a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.